Hey, it's Rebecca Rutherford. Welcome to the What in the Well podcast. My friend Angie Huber and I are here to help provide an entertaining, unique, authentic, relatable perspective on well-being. We're trying to uncover what it means to maintain a balanced existence in all areas of your life, relationships, work, leadership, what have you. We want to help you shift your mindset, make real progress toward the work and home life you desire, while we share stories of how this stuff works in our own lives and in the lives of our coaching clients and the communities we serve. So if you feel out of balance, stuck, strained, overwhelmed, but hopeful that improvement is on the horizon, you are in the right place.
Welcome to What in the Well podcast. Today, we are focusing on self-love, loving yourself, and worthiness. Before we dive into that, Rebecca, I just got to tell you, your son's pictures on Facebook, or is it Facebook that I see?
Probably.
I mean, just talk about love yourself, right?
Well,
like that confidence in your son is just, I love it.
I don't want that to ever go away for him. I'm like, how can I nurture that in him so that forever and ever, amen, every single time he gets a haircut, he wants to put on sunglasses and have a photo shoot.
Because that's what it's all about, right?
I know.
And I want that for my kids so bad too.
I think it's really interesting that this whole thing kind of kicked off already on the whole like self-love concept as being something that we are born with to an extent. You know, I don't think we are born knowing the difference between necessarily whether we are loved or not. We just kind of maybe assume in our brains, I don't know, when we're just a newborn, like you don't have the ability to doubt whether or not you're loved. But as time goes on and as your brain develops and as you become hyper aware of the input of people around you, like where does that go? And how do you recover that?
And how do you recover? Yes. How do you stay with it even? But if you lose it, how do you get it back?
Right.
So when you come out on the other side.
Right. So how do you define self-love?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. You know, there's a great definition in here, and so I'll share the definition, but then I'll put it in my just layman's terms, right? Because I think that's nobody's going to remember. We all won't remember the definition, but what's interesting is one of the definitions is self-love is a state of appreciation for oneself that grows. Think about growing like our plant from actions that support our physical, so our body, our psychological and spiritual growth. So our mind, body, spirit.
Yep.
Self-love means having a high regard for your own well-being and happiness. Self-love means taking care of your own needs and not sacrificing them for your own well-being to please others. And so for me, what self-love is I am enough.
Yes.
Period.
Yeah.
That I believe, not by anyone else's definition, I believe that I am enough.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. I think that's really important. You know, it's interesting because that is one of like, I don't know if you've ever seen that tattoo on anybody, but every now and then I see somebody with that tattoo to their skin.
Like I am enough.
Yeah. And I feel like that is because I think there's so many people who are kind of realizing too, like, how can I return to myself? How can I actually believe that in my soul? And because it's so hard to do that, like we need a little reminder. Often we need a reminder.
And I can't say that I'm fully there, frankly, right? I mean, even as I say it, like I just keep saying it. I write it in my mantras, my daily mantras, like my I am statements. I am enough. And what's it mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think that definition is really, really, really good because it is a whole mix of how you feel about yourself mentally, physically, and spiritually. And when one of those pieces seems to be out of whack, then it's really easy to kind of start going into self-criticism and shame and all of that other good stuff.
There's a program I'm going through right now called Positive Intelligence. It's a 8-week coaching program. And the whole thing is about doing, they call it PQ, like positive intelligence. You got IQ, you got EQ, right? Emotional intelligence. They call it PQ. And you're building PQ reps, like your muscles.
Nice.
And literally every day, what we're trying to do is silence the saboteur. That's our inner critic, right? That tells us we're not enough and all the things that come in with that, and build up. They call it SAGE, right? And in coaching, we use a term called leader within. I think they're very similar, like your SAGE power, your positive power, where you feel fully empowered and you are in self-love.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating. Like each day, I'm literally throughout the day, like at 9, my 9 o'clock one probably already kicked in that I need to go and do. But it's called PQ reps, and it's like lifting weights, but for to activate the PQ and silence the saboteur.
I love that because
That,
I do feel like we don't exercise our minds the same way that we look to our, physical health to be resolved through exercising our bodies, obviously, or nurturing it by the way we eat or whatever it may be. But I love that. I love the idea of incorporating exercises to help with your mental and your spiritual growth as well. That's so important.
how do you activate on the day-to-day? So like even like this morning when you're feeling maybe a little out of sorts or intensity is happening, how do you activate your self-love?
Well, so this morning, the reason I started out very, very peacefully is because I've gotten into a habit that I never thought I would get into of waking up early, lighting a candle, and journaling. This is not something even a year ago that I would have thought I could ever do. I am by nature a night owl. I never understood morning people, but what I realized was that I was missing time for myself where I could nurture myself, where I could have peace and quiet and have the energy to invest in developing my own self-worth, honestly, because that to me is what journaling always tries to bring me back to, is returning to myself and understanding what is going on, sifting through my thoughts so I don't get extraordinarily caught up in all of the nonsense that a day can bring and all the chaos. Because as soon as my alarm goes off that tells me it's time to wake up my kids for school, it's like I've had 2 different days. But if I'm grounded in that, then I'm a far better person. But this morning I started with that and it was very peaceful. And I had a lot of joy because I kind of had a revelation during my writing. And I got the kids up and I actually started playing some music, and I was listening to a Cat Stevens song. I was listening to, Morning Has Broken. And I was so excited about that. I had so much joy. And then things were okay, except for my kids started to be late for school. Like we could see the time ticking to where the bus was going to arrive, and it became very, very intense. And then we got them on the bus, barely, which seems to be happening a lot lately. And then my husband and I had a conversation. I was telling him about something that had happened yesterday that kind of bothered me, and I just wanted to get it off my chest. And ultimately, what that did in me was it made this intensity arise even more. And the conversation, it just wasn't good. It was like he had to get to work, and I was just like, he left for work, which he should have. He needed to. He had meetings. But then I just sat there and I'm like, this is the complete opposite of how I felt 40 minutes ago. I went from having just joy and Cat Stevens, and I was like,
and a candle,
and I thought, like, the idea of even playing that Cat Stevens song just repulsed me. I was like, I'm not joyful anymore. Morning is broken, literally. It is broken, and I just like it.
So imagine, right? Like in those moments, of like, okay, this conversation isn't going well, or even the moments with your kids because a lot of it's the expectation not being met was where stress comes, right? Stress is literally unmet expectations, whether the expectation is hard or not, like not real, right? So getting the kids on the bus at a certain time is like you got a hard thing there.
Yeah.
What could have shifted? Like what would have happened if you would have stayed in the mindset?
Yeah. Well, I think everyone would have started their day more peacefully. I was working on remembering that at the end of the day, when I just sit in the moment and I say, those are stories that I'm telling myself about what happened or what could go wrong. In this moment, I am safe. And what I wrote down was, I am is the end of the sentence. That's it. I just am. Like, I am right here. I am
present.
safe. I am enough, to your point.
I am
I
whole,
am
whatever it is. I am.
Yeah, I am.
Ooh, what's that like when you just like the energy that I just felt doesn't even need to be enough. I just am.
Yeah.
And isn't that our innate, like the whole thing? And Brene Brown does a ton of work on this about worthiness that I know we want to share. And one of the things I like that she says is the moment you're born, you have the right, like you are enough because you are here.
Yeah. That's it. I know there doesn't have to be any more.
There is no more, no less.
Yeah.
You are enough, and
Right.
because you are here.
Well, one of the things that I think a lot about, and I work with my clients on, is identity, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the times what happens is when we develop an identity about who we think we are. So I like one of the things that actually irks me when I watch reality TV shows where it's like a Bachelor or whatever it is, what is when they say, this is John, he's 32 years old, and he is an accountant.
Right.
He is, I am an accountant. And so we go through our lives like trying to figure out who we need to be and what we need to identify with. And we lose that sense of self-love because we realize that unless we are validated as the I am that we've created ourselves to be, then we're not good enough. Like if I am not the rockinest accountant in the world, then I have failed at creating that identity.
Well, and I'm loving being in my 40s. So for anyone, like I'm loving it for some reason. They used to call it a midlife crisis. Not me. I am in midlife awakening and I love every moment of it. I'm learning just as much as I'm unlearning. I am unlearning all of the stuff and it's awakening and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you just mentioned is, yes, like how limiting and boring for John, has just put his whole life as being defined as an accountant. That's one thing. That's one thing that he does that is part of him as a whole person. I guarantee, did you say John? I know we're making up his name, but 32-year-old John from wherever, right? Like,
yeah.
How boring is that? Not boring. How limiting is that? And so much we put ourselves in these small little boxes of one thing and we're not.
No.
My coach actually had me do this like when I was, you're going through coaching certification, you get to have a coach that you're working on yourself while you're building up your coaching. And she had me write out all the roles you play, Angie. Everything from I am the launderer to like the job that I do to the I am the mom, I am the wife, I am the friend, I am the daughter, I'm the daughter-in-law, I am the granddaughter. Like every role you play, it was like 75 to like 100.
Yeah. Yes.
And yes, it had a few things of what I also am a leader. I am right? Like the things I do that I get paid for to do, but there is a whole lot of other. And so how do we help to break ourselves free of that we are not just one role?
Well, I love what you said about loving your 40s because first of all, I'm having the same experience where, everybody talks about it, like you said, a midlife crisis, right? Well, I realized pretty quickly that right now I'm in the second. Richard Rohr talks about it as being, you have two halves of life. I'm entering the second half of life where I become free of all of that pressure of creating an identity. And I look back on the life that I had before now, and I'm like, if this is a midlife crisis, then I've just been in a life crisis this whole time. How could I be in any more of a crisis than my whole life to get to this point? Right. I think it's like our but the gift that this season of life can give us is to stop identifying as I am John the accountant. I am 32, because with all of that comes all this baggage. Like people always say, oh, well, by the time I'm 40, I had set this goal that I was going to do X, Y, and Z by now, and I haven't done anything. So I am a failure. I am, I am not good enough. I am whatever.
Define it by your
Right.
terms, not
Right.
anybody else's.
Right.
Not anybody
Absolutely.
else's.
Yeah. So back to self-love, what do you feel like it is about? I mean, I feel like we're kind of like straddling the idea of identity and self-love. That makes so much sense. So how, why do you think this is so important? Like, why do you think, especially in this season of life, it is so important to work through this now as opposed to, not starting?
Yeah. Rebecca, what comes up for me is like the other part of self-love is worthiness,
Yes.
right? So self-love might be the actions
Mhm.
that we do that we're talking about doing, our I am statements, the journaling, like how do you get into self-love? But then
Yeah.
there's a mindset, a belief
Mm. Yeah.
of worthiness. So part of the unlearning or relearning is that kind of what we talked about before is worthiness is not something you earn.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will
It's
share
not you
something.
go out and get I work and I got my degree, now I'm worthy. It's
Right.
not. So how do we, for me, there's the mindset of self-love that I think is rooted in worthiness.
Yeah.
And then the act. How do you get yourself into self-love in the day to stay grounded? How do you get yourself into self-love in the moments when you're feeling stressed or you're triggered or your things aren't going well? Those
Right.
are the acts. But
Yeah. So I'll share something that happened to me that kind of that worthiness piece really hit home for me. So years ago, I was let go from a job, and talk about humbling and talk about feeling worthless. Even though the circumstances were outside of my control, I internalized that. I took it so personally.
yeah.
And I am worthless was something that repeated over and
Mm.
over and over in my head because I rationalized in that moment that if I were worthy, I wouldn't have been let go. Like I should be so valuable by this other person's standards that they would dare never let me go. So it was extraordinarily humbling, painful. And even when I think about it now, that person hurts, that the person who got let go still has some pain around it. But it, in hindsight, was a catalyst for me to figure out how I can keep going through life without needing the identity as the successful marketer and still feel like I have self-worth. And maybe what it taught me too were other things around, what was it about that role that I was serving in that, at that company that wasn't a good fit for me either. It's not just about me being wrong for it, it's about it being wrong for me.
Right.
Right. So I learned so much through that process, but I also had to go through a season where I felt worthless. I felt like I could hardly love myself at that moment. I thought I am expendable, I'm disposable, I am not worth anything. And it was extremely, extremely painful. But through that suffering, I learned so much about myself and who I feel like I am really at the end of the day, and how I don't need something like that, something like a job, something like an identity as a marketer to remind me eternally that I am worth something on this planet.
Well, and if you put 100% of your identity in that external,
Yeah.
somebody else defining it, and again, that had nothing to do with you, right? And
Right.
this happens all day long. But if you're putting 100% in and placing on that bet,
Yeah.
and it goes and it doesn't happen,
Your
how
host.
do we diversify again, understand all the roles we're playing,
Right.
and really put the right percentage into that? How do we rewrite that I am not just my age
Right.
and my role?
Right.
I am all the things. And if you put it on a pie chart and break it up all in the percentages, when one goes away, it's like, oh,
Right.
I'm still grounded because I have all these other things of who I am.
Right.
I need to figure that one out, and it doesn't become such a blow. And that one, how much does it truly matter at the end of the day? I mean, it matters because, that's where you're putting your heart and your work and your soul into it.
Right. So
you mentioned one other concept I just want to circle back to is this finding self-worth in the suffering, in the tough times, in the suck.
Yeah.
One thing I'm learning or practicing more is when things are hard and suck and there's lots of suffering, how do I, how can you even try and do it from a place of calm, curiosity, acceptance? What is there to learn here? Because there is so much learning. Not that we want to stay in suffering.
No.
We don't, but it is a part of life.
Yeah.
We have hard moments. We suffer. And if we stop for just a moment and be I am in the middle, kind of like how you teach your daughter, like pause, get out of your, like get your head over here and just observe maybe how do we just pause? I am.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
That's exactly it. I actually last March, I had a speaking engagement for an association that is comprised of our state city clerks and finance officers. It was a very random
That's awesome.
speaking engagement, but my presentation was on listening and how to listen more effectively to other people, how to get listened to, and how to listen to yourself. And one of the things that was just kind of the underlying premise for the entire presentation was that we have two parts. We have the ego self and the observer. And that the observer is really, truly, I am. It really is truly who we are. It's the person who creates space to detach even momentarily from the things that the ego is telling us about who we are. Because our ego, it's always confusing because people think of like ego as like having this like huge self-confidence and like you're so egotistical, but truly we all have an ego that is death gripping to certain identities and certain things, and it serves a purpose. It's trying to keep us safe. It's kind of the me, and I've been hurt and I've been whatever. But the observer side of us, the true essence of who we are, that space that we have inside of us that isn't attached to virtually anything, it just can be that when you can return to the observer state and listen to other people, listen to yourself, and take care of yourself and serve people in the way that makes sense for you, that's when you can detach more wholly from that ego side and say, all right, even when I'm feeling this way, because it's gonna happen, I'm gonna feel unsafe, I'm gonna have my feelings hurt. The point is never to try to fully get rid of the ego, but the idea is that we're talking about awareness. It's returning to the observer self, becoming aware of what is triggering your ego, what's underneath that, and how you can just let it be for a while and sift through it and not try to reject it and not let it have a purpose in your life. There's always a purpose to what it's trying to tell you.
What I like to think about ego, and I don't know how much there is to this, but ego a lot of times comes from our thinking, right? So it's leading with our head a lot of times. And when you're talking about the observer, I think about leading from your heart and your gut and leading there. And I heard a beautiful thing one time is that let your heart and your gut guide you towards your purpose. Like let that lead. And then let your thoughts in your head and your ego help you figure out how to get there. It's when we lead from our head and our ego, it's where we potentially get into trouble. Last principle is believe that you deserve love and belonging. Not from others. Deserve that you Believe that you deserve love and belonging.
Yeah. It's our birthright. I mean, if you think about it too, what we started this conversation with was around my son and his, new mohawk that he got that he's extra proud of. And he doesn't really, I mean, maybe that part of him is kind of forming ego and identity at a young age, but he doesn't know. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. Yeah, the ego wants us to believe that it's personal, that it is our fault, and that we did something inherently wrong, or we are inherently wrong. When in reality, like I said before, that thing that I wasn't a good fit for, turns out it wasn't a good fit for me either.
Yeah.
And
that's usually what happens.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't just me. It was there was a bigger plan that I needed that sad and painful push into that next thing for me. And if I wouldn't have gotten that, if I wouldn't have been let go, if I wouldn't have had that suffering, then I would have stayed there, and I would have, at my own expense and the expense of all the other slices of life pie, I would have just continued to grind away at forming my identity around that thing that didn't belong to me, and that I didn't belong to mutually.
Yeah. Yeah. And putting so much percentage of your roles into that. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason it's exhausted.
Right. What are we walking away from? What do we want? What's the key thing? Where can we get started? If you're just starting on this self-love journey, or if you're a few years in.
Yeah. I think for me, again, it goes back to figuring out how you can let I am be the end of the sentence, and not try to end that sentence with a bunch of stuff that is identity related, that is, too hard to control or manage, or that takes up too many slices of your life pie. And we are always going to have certain roles, but when you return to your true self, where love can actually exist, I am simply has to be that end of that sentence.
Yeah. So I say, if you're getting started practicing, whether it's a journaling and doing a few I am statements each morning, if it's in the moment, like so what I'm taking away from us, and I'm going to practice, is in the moments of stress, because when we hang up here, I'm going right back into the den of chaos. And how do I stay grounded in I am in that, and not get caught up in all the things. So I want to continue to practice that. And if you're not ready just to say I am, right, what is it? Is it I am enough? I am love. I am kind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, find the things about yourself that you do identify with, and write those down, and remind yourself regularly that at the end of that sentence, maybe there are still some really, really, really good things. It's not all bad.
Yeah. And I think that's if you can adopt the mindset and shift the mindset to worthiness, that you are worthy. And how do you start to do kind of what we talked about earlier, your PQ reps, right? Your emotional, your intelligent reps on self-love and that's how you build the muscles and the new pathways is I am. So Rebecca and I are signing off.
Everybody down and give me 20 PQ reps.
I am.
All 20. Every single time.
Actually, I love that.
Down and give me 20.
Down and give me 20. Thanks for tuning in to What in the Well podcast. Hope you've enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed making it for you, and we will see you next time.
All right.